Hey everybody, this is my native tank, and the fish in here are cold water fish. And it got me thinking. I've had a lot of people misunderstand what the term cold water fish means, and it just sort of got me thinking about water temperature in my various tanks. And I've kind of thought about shooting this video before, but I got a few minutes to kill while we're waiting for this tank to drain. So it might be a little gurgly and noisy. I'm leaving the filter running while we do this. But cold water fish don't necessarily need to be in cold water. They can tolerate cold water. Now, before I go further, there are some fish that do need to be in colder water. Trout come to mind, for example, around here. Trout won't thrive in water that starts getting too warm. And by too warm, I mean upper 60s too warm. Trout really need to be in cold water to thrive or do well. But let's take these fish, for example, or sunfish that I've had in this tank, the various warmest species. We're all familiar with carp, koi, goldfish. They regularly go in water temperature that's in the 90s, and it doesn't affect them one way or the other, but you can overwinter them in your frozen pond, and they're also just fine. That is what a cold water fish is. These fish in this tank are just fine in the water they're in, yet an unheated tank, believe it or not, this is the warmest tank I've got in the room, and I've got no heat on it at all. So why is this my warmest tank in the room? And it's because of the lighting that's on it, I'm assuming. And it's also being heated by the rest of my fish room. When you've got, let's say, one heated tank in the room, as the heat dissipates from that tank, it's effectively a space heater that's warming the room. And while it might be a lot to ask for one little tank heater to heat an entire room full of fish tanks, you know, over time, if I'm not in here pulling temperature out of the room, if I don't have the windows open, if I don't have the fan blowing, you know, cooling the room down, this whole room is about 80 degrees, and most of my tanks in this room sit very close to 80 degrees, and I've only got a few of the tanks in this room heated, and I rarely ever see the red lights lit. Only usually during water changes will I ever see the lights lit on my tank heaters, and the reason is because I've got all of these lighting units on top of all of these tanks. So let's go around the room and have a look at some of my tanks. We got my heat gun here. This is my warmest tank. Let's see if we can read it. 82 degrees. I guess you can see that. I can see it. This tank is 82 degrees. How about I get out of the way of the light? There we go. 82.2 degrees. That's to the glass. Let's see if it's any different right directly on the water. 82.2, as I suspected. So we know we're getting an accurate temperature there. This is my cold water fish. This is my native fish tank, and it's 82.2 degrees. It's like bath water in there. If we look at my little snail tank over here, this doesn't have any kind of serious lighting on it at all. We're at 76 degrees. This has two of these high output T5 units on it. We're at almost 80 degrees on this tank. My 125 is likewise 77, so this one's actually a little cooler. Let's try over here. Okay, so this tank's actually a little cooler than my other ones, and this is a heated tank. This one actually has the alright, there we go. Now we're getting up to 79 degrees. I wonder why that is. That's unusual. I wonder if I'm hitting dark spots. That's really interesting. This end of the tank is much cooler, yet the lighting is identical. It goes straight down the middle of the tank. I've got a big fixture right here, and then I've got little dome lights on either end, so it should be the same temperature. I wonder if maybe the plant right here isn't absorbing a lot more of the light, and I'm getting a warmer temperature right here where that plant is. Now I'm going to be scratching my head about this all day. How can the tank be 3 degrees different from one end of the tank to the other. That doesn't make any sense. I don't know. That's a mystery. We're going to have to think about that one. But let's continue on as we've started here. See, we're 79 degrees. Now this tank should be a little cooler. We should probably be about 77 degrees on this one again. Oh, we're way cooler. 74.5 degrees on this one. So this is down lower to the floor. It's at the edge of the room where, you know, the rest of my basement is much cooler. So this tank is significantly cooler than my other ones. Crab tank, a little bit cooler. 74. 75 down here where the water is. The 74 was up where the air was. So the water in this tank is 75. Well, alright, the whole tank is about 75 degrees. I usually try to take multiple tests just to make sure I'm getting a sort of range. That's why it's so puzzling on my 125. So we're about 75 degrees in this tank. Now I actually thought that tank was going to be a little bit warmer. That tank always feels pretty warm to me. So this tank has little LEDs on top, and they're not even particularly strong LEDs. So what are we looking at? 74. That's about what I expected on this tank too. And now we get over here to where I've got these big shop lamps on the top, and we should be back up into the upper 70s. Yeah, we're up at the 79.5 again. 78.3. So we're definitely in the very close to 80 degrees on this tank. This tank should be the same way. We should be very close to 80 degrees. 77. So more of this has to do on these tanks with the lighting and the water circulation than the heaters I have in the tanks. I usually keep my heaters set at about 76 degrees just so that if for some reason the tank gets colder, the heater will kick on and keep it from getting too chilly, but I seldom find that I need to use heaters. And again, this tank is the warmest tank I've got. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that. That's kind of puzzling. I was going to suggest that maybe the darker wood is absorbing more of the light and it's increasing the temperature, but then we look at a tank like this and I've got tons of dark wood and rocks and black substrate, for crying out loud. This might account for why, you know, I've got the white substrate in there. That might account for why this tank is a little bit cooler, even though I've got very similar lighting on it. But this tank has a big shop light on it, and so therefore I would expect this tank to be a little bit warmer, and it is. But I'm going to be puzzled by that other tank all day. This tank has a shop light on this end, and then it's got 3 or 4 LED units. I guess there's 3. You can see the reflections in the water down there. I have 3 LED units down there, and despite LED not getting very warm in front of it, the unit itself is very hot. It's very warm to the touch. So those are like 3 little heaters sitting on top of there as well. And despite my, this being my cold water tank, it is the warmest tank I've got in the room. So make what you want of that. I've never worried too much about the temperature. I assume that most tropical fish can do okay anywhere from, mid-70s to 80-ish degrees. And that's about where all of my tanks sit. My cooler tanks are at about the 74, 75 degrees, and my warmer tanks are about 79 degrees. So unless I've got some very unusual fish that really requires either very warm temperatures, or I have a fish that specifically requires very cool temperatures, I'm usually just okay with keeping fish in my tanks, and I don't worry that much about heating them or the temperature. I also wanted to make sure everyone understood that cold water fish do not necessarily need to be in cold water. Cold water fish typically means that they can tolerate and withstand cold water, and they can adjust their metabolism based on the temperature of the water, and they won't die off if the temperature drops too low. They can go into almost a stasis at some point and withstand near freezing temperatures. So again, make what you want of that. I hope that was helpful or informative or something. Again, don't really know what that was all about. I'm just kind of killing some time here while I'm doing this water change. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe. I always say you never know what you're going to get with me, and this video proves it. So thanks again, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.